Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for a story that really highlights one of the biggest paradoxes of the early digital age.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. A huge cultural win on one side.
Exactly. Married to, well, frankly, a shocking corporate tragedy on the other. We're diving deep into the Def Jam Vendetta video game series.
Ah, yes, a massive landmark. Fusing hip-hop, wrestling, gaming. It was huge back in the early 2000s.
Huge is right. Critically acclaimed, commercially a smash hit. It really defined a moment.
It really did. But, our mission today is to look at the conflict underneath that success.
Right. This massive, estimated $72 million in profit the game's generated.
Versus the shockingly small amount paid to the main artists. We're talking about 12 key people here.
The very people who provided their likeness, their music, their, cultural value.
Absolutely. And our main source here is an academic report that's really dug into this.
Yeah, it looks at the sales figures, estimates for what the artist got paid, the cultural impact.
Yeah.
It lays it all out.
And just to set the stage financially, even before we get into how the game was made.
We need some numbers.
Yeah.
Because the scale here is, well, it's pretty big.
It really is. The report states the combined series sales hit 1.8 million units in the U.S. alone by 2006.
1.8 million. And if you just take the first game, Def Jam Vendetta, the PlayStation 2 version.
That alone sold 750,000 copies.
Which generated about $30 million. Just in the U.S., just on PS2.
Yeah, that really cemented it as a major hit, no question.
Okay, so let's unpack that. How did this massive success come about? It wasn't an accident.
Definitely not. We're talking Def Jam Vendetta in 2003, and then the sequel, Def Jam Fight for NY in 2004.
And these weren't small indie games. This was Electronic Arts, EA.
Right, under their EA Sports big label, which was kind of their experimental, edgier brand at the time, developed by AKI Corporation and EA Canada.
So major players involved.
Absolutely. You had serious corporate muscle behind this. Kevin Liles, who was Def Jam's president then, he really championed it. Saw it as like an extension of the Def Jam brand. And high-level EA execs were involved too, like Paul Lee. Even the CEO, Larry Probst, signed off. This was a blue-chip project for them.
Which makes the development timeline even crazier.
Right. You'd think with all the celebrity likenesses, the motion capture, music licensing.
For years, right.
You'd expect that, yeah. But the sources say the first game, Vendetta.
Only 8 months.
8 months. Seriously.
Seriously. Which is just, lightning speed for a major release like this, especially building it pretty much from scratch.
What does that tell you?
Well, two things, mainly. Huge corporate motivation, obviously, and a real push to hit the market while that cultural moment was absolutely boiling hot.
And the roster was that cultural moment, wasn't it?
Totally. The first game, Vendetta in '03, had 12 main Def Jam artists, DMX, Method Man, Redman, Ludacris.
Ghostface Killah, Joe Budden, a powerhouse lineup.
And then Fight for NY just went even bigger. They brought in Snoop Dogg as the main villain.
Right. And Lil Kim, Ice-T, Busta Rhymes, Fat Joe. The total roster jumped to 69 characters. It felt like a real statement about hip-hop star power back then.
Okay, so massive success, huge stars, rapid development. Which leads us right to the core issue here, the money.
Yeah. This is where the evidence of what the report calls a mathematical betrayal really comes in.
Let's synthesize those numbers again. Total series revenue, conservatively estimated.
Based on 1.8 million U.S. units at maybe $40 a pop, you're looking at around $72 million, give or take.
$72 million, okay. Now, let's zoom back in on just that first PS2 game, Vendetta. $30 million revenue in the U.S. What did EA actually pocket from that?
Well, after the stores took their cut, manufacturing costs, all that, EA's estimated net profit was probably around $21 million.
$21 million net profit for EA from one version of the first game.
Yeah, a huge return on their investment.
So, the big question, what did the 12 main artists get? The ones whose faces, voices, music, their whole vibe made that $21 million possible.
Okay, brace yourself. This is where it gets pretty jarring.
I'm ready.
The research across the board describes their compensation as minimal to none.
Minimal to none. What does that mean in dollars?
The figure that comes up repeatedly is $500 or less, often just called a few $100s.
Yeah, hang on. A few $100s each. Or are you saying the total payout for all 12 main artists might have been around $6,000 combined?
It's the latter. Even being generous, assuming they all got $500, the total for all 12 of them combined is estimated at just $6,000.
$6,000.
Yeah.
Split 12 ways. For a game that netted the publisher $21 million on just one console. How is that even possible? Legally? Contractually?
That's the absolute crux of the report. It details how the contracts were structured. Basically, EA and Def Jam kept an estimated 99.97% of the revenue.
99.97%.
Which left collectively for all 12 main artists, 0.03%.
I can barely wrap my head around that split.
It's extreme. And if you compare it to, like, industry standards, the report suggests a fair royalty rate for using someone's likeness, voice, music in a hit game like this should be somewhere between, say, 1% and 5%.
Okay, so what would that have looked like?
Well, if they'd gotten just a conservative 1% royalty on that $30 million PS2 revenue, each artist should have gotten about $25,000.
Right. Still not millions, but respectable.
Exactly. And at a 5% rate, which is also reasonable for top talent in a hit, they would have been due maybe $125,000 each.
So compared to that $500.
The analysis concludes they were underpaid by somewhere between 4,900% and, wait for it, 24,900%.
24,900%. That paints a very stark picture of exploitation.
It really does. But here's the twist, the sort of profound irony that the research highlights next.
Which is?
Despite getting paid almost nothing, these artists were apparently really invested in the game itself, creatively.
Right. That's the dissonance. They weren't just phoning it in. They cared about the product.
Deeply. Method Man, for example, he was super enthusiastic. He saw it as, quote, conquering the popular culture, merging street fighting, wrestling, hip-hop. He loved it.
And he was involved in the details?
Oh, yeah. He wanted his character to look perfect, and he apparently spent a lot of time designing his ultimate finishing move.
Okay. But here's the kicker you mentioned earlier. The check he got.
The report suggests the only check he received was for suggesting they add an in-game tutorial.
For the tutorial idea. Not for his face, his voice, his music being central to the whole thing.
Apparently not. It's this bizarre example of, like, contractual loopholes, where the lawyers put the value versus where the actual value was.
Unbelievable. What about others?
Ludacris also said he was very happy with it. He liked having input on his character's clothes, his moves. You know, seeing yourself animated like that back then was probably pretty cool.
Yeah, you can see the appeal, separate from the money. And that pride comes through in some anecdotes too, right? Like Ghostface Killer.
Oh, the Ghostface story is legendary. His idea for his special move?
What was it again?
He wanted the giant gold eagle cuff he wore on his arm to, like, come alive.
Seriously?
Yeah. Fly off his arm and claw the opponent's eyes out. An incredibly elaborate vision.
Okay, that's amazing, but probably not feasible back then.
Definitely not. Not on an 8-month timeline with the PS2 engine. The developers just couldn't do it. Apparently, Ghostface later confronted the producer, genuinely asking, "Yo, what happened to my eagle, man?"
Huh. So they were clearly invested on an artistic level.
Absolutely. Even DMX apparently complained, saying, you know, his music was all over the game. He was the hardest character to unlock. He felt like it was pretty much my stuff.
So they weren't passive. They were collaborators who got paid pennies.
Which leads to the obvious question the sources try to answer. Why? Why did they agree to these deals?
And the answer seems to be leverage.
Pretty much. Corporate leverage exploiting cultural ambition. Ice-T gave a really revealing interview about this in 2024.
What did he say?
He basically said he didn't think anyone got paid anything substantial back then, and he explained the pressure. Quote, "It was a situation where you didn't want to be left out of the game."
Ah, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
FOMO, but on a massive cultural scale.
Exactly that. The companies knew these artists wanted, maybe even needed, to be part of this huge, potentially historic cultural moment. Joe Budden kind of confirmed this too.
How so?
He said, "A lot of the white people knew me from that video game." He acknowledged the companies knew how to franchise some stuff.
Right.
The label just wasn't going to pay ninjas for it. They understood the exposure was valuable, maybe more valuable than the immediate check, at least to the artists at that time.
So, okay, if the original payment was basically negligible for something that made potentially $72 million, how does that stack up today? Section 4 of the research puts this in modern context, right?
Yeah, and it really drives home just how vast the underpayment was, because now we have clear comparisons.
Like what?
Well, think about Travis Scott's appearance in Fortnite. Just a brief virtual concert.
How much did he make from that?
Reportedly around $20 million.
$20 million for a short virtual event.
No, or Nicki Minaj in Call of Duty. Her operator bundle, the estimates suggest she commands upwards of $20 per player who buys it.
Wow. Okay, so those numbers really underscore the scale of the original deal.
They absolutely confirm it. If the Def Jam artists were paid, like we said, potentially 249 to nearly 5,000 times less than modern equivalents, It makes that original deal look completely indefensible today.
Yeah, no kidding.
And, that context also explains why we haven't seen a new Def Jam game, despite fans constantly asking for one.
Right. Why is that?
Joe Budden put it perfectly. The reason there's no sequel is because, quote, the business is right. Meaning, artists now know their value in gaming.
The leverage has shifted.
Completely. As Ice-T said, summing it all up, yesterday's price is not today's price.
You can't get away with paying a few $100 anymore.
No way. To bring back that roster, or a similar one today, a publisher would have to pay millions upon millions for the likenesses, the voice work, the music. The fear of missing out doesn't work anymore. You got to pay fair market value.
So the artist learned a lesson, albeit an expensive one.
Yeah.
What about the corporate side? EA made a killing initially.
They did. But it's also worth noting the corporate legacy isn't entirely rosy either. Despite that massive success, EA actually ended up closing EA Chicago in 2007.
That was the studio that grew out of the Def Jam and Fight Night teams, right?
Exactly. Apparently, later revenue expectations weren't met on subsequent projects, and despite the huge initial profits from Def Jam, the studio got shut down. A multi-million-dollar hit ends with a closed studio. Kind of weird.
Huh. So wrapping this up,
Yeah.
the Def Jam Vendetta series, it really does feel like a crucial case study.
Yeah, a case study in how Black cultural creation and value were systematically undervalued in that early digital era.
The corporations banked, we estimate, $72 million. The creators got, well, fractions of a percent, often just the promise of cultural exposure instead of actual money.
It was definitely, as people say, a historical moment in our culture, no doubt. But the business side, pretty predatory. It leveraged that creative desire against fair pay.
And that financial injustice became a really, really expensive lesson for hip-hop artists about their digital rights, their market value, a lesson that's clearly stuck.
It absolutely has. The landscape is different now because of experiences like this.
The lesson was learned, sure, but think about the cost to those original artists. And when you see these numbers, you can't help but wonder.
How many other big cultural hits from the early 2000s have a similar story?
Exactly. Movies, TV shows, other games based on pop culture. Could they share this same kind of secret history? Financial exploitation, hiding behind cultural success.
It definitely raises a big question for today, too. With digital assets, NFTs, influencer deals, AI likenesses, what cultural currency right now is being undervalued by big companies?
Who's banking on creators wanting visibility more than fair compensation?
It feels like a pattern that just finds new ways to repeat itself, doesn't it?
It really does. Something to definitely mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.